You are being ridiculous. Mia, Eric needs this more than you, my mother said, waving the deed in my face during what was supposed to be a joyous housewarming party. He has a family to support. What do you have? Just yourself. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I stood there. In the kitchen of the house I had poured my life savings into, struggling to breathe as my world crumbled around me. My name is Mia Vanoy, and at 33 years old, I never imagined my own family would betray me like this. As a nurse at Memorial Hospital, I had spent the last 10 years working double shifts, picking up overtime in the ICU, and saving every penny I could. When my parents faced foreclosure on their old house, I stepped in with my life savings $175,000 to help them buy a new one. The agreement was crystal clear the house would be in my name, since I had provided the down payment. But apparently, agreements do not mean much to my family. My stepbrother, Eric, my mother's golden child from her second marriage, stood there with his usual smug grin. He had never contributed a dime to our parents' well-being. He was always too busy hopping from one failed business venture to the next. But now, at 38, he suddenly had a wife and a baby on the way, which apparently made him more deserving of my investment. We have already filed the paperwork, my stepfather, George, chimed in, without even looking me in the eye. The house is now in Eric's name. You should be happy. You are helping your brother start his family. The nonchalant way he dismissed my sacrifice made my blood boil. The beautiful colonial-style house I had fallen in love with, the one I had envisioned as a gathering place for family holidays and celebrations, was being handed over to someone who had not earned it. Looking around at the faces of family and friends who had come to celebrate, I could see the awkward glances and hushed conversations. My Aunt Sarah, who had always been more of a mother to me than my own mother, stood in the corner, shaking her head in disbelief. My best friend, Betcho, who had witnessed me working myself to the bone to save that money, gripped her glass so tightly I thought it would shatter. This is not right, I managed to say, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. That money was all I had. We had an agreement. Oh, stop being so dramatic, my mother said, rolling her eyes. You are a nurse. You will save it again. Eric needs a stable home for his baby. It is not like you have anyone to take care of. That is when something inside me snapped. Years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who always sacrificed for everyone else, came crashing down. As I looked at their self-satisfied faces, I knew this would not end here. I had no idea what I was capable of when pushed too far. Growing up, I always knew I was different in Eric's and my parents' eyes. After my father passed away when I was 6, my mother remarried George within a year. Eric whirled into our lives and immediately became the center of their universe. While I spent weekends studying and working part-time at the local pharmacy to save for college, Eric received a shower of new cars, expensive clothes, and endless second chances. I put myself through nursing school, working nights as a nursing assistant and taking out student loans I am still paying off. Every time Eric's business ventures failed the car wash, the supplement company, the cryptocurrency investment opportunity, my parents would drain their savings to bail him out. I watched them refinance their house 3 times to cover his mistakes, saying nothing as I watched their retirement slip away. When they called me 6 months ago, desperate and crying because they were about to lose their house, I did not hesitate. I had been saving up for my own place, dreaming of a little house with a garden where I could finally put down roots. Instead, I offered them my savings, thinking that this would finally prove my worth to them. We spent weeks looking at houses together, and I fell in love with the Colonial on Maple Street. The realtor worked with us to make it happen, and I signed all the preliminary documents as the owner. You are a blessing, honey, my mother had said at the time, hugging me tightly. We will make this work as a family. I believed her. I wanted to believe her so badly that I ignored the warning signs, the whispered phone calls with Eric, the meetings with their lawyer I had not been invited to, the way they stalled on finalizing the paperwork. Betcho had tried to warn me. Mia, get everything in writing, she had said one morning over coffee. I do not trust them to treat you fairly. But I had defended them, convinced that even if they favored Eric, they would not steal from me. After all, what kind of parents would do that to their own daughter? The day before the housewarming party, I went to Target and spent hours picking out new decorations for what I thought would be my investment property. I bought fluffy towels for the bathrooms, cheerful throw pillows for the living room, and a welcome mat that read, "Home Sweet Home." Now, all those items seemed like cruel jokes, scattered around a house that had been stolen from me. Standing in the kitchen, watching Eric strut around as if he had earned all of this, I thought about all the nights I had worked in the ICU, the holidays I had missed, the relationships I had put on hold, the vacations I had never taken, all to save that money. They had not just stolen my savings. They had stolen years of my life. As the party swirled around me, my head spun. Guests were starting to leave, awkwardly congratulating Eric while avoiding eye contact with me. I sat alone on the kitchen counter, staring at my phone, when Betcho slid into the seat next to me. "You need to call Marquez," she whispered, referring to her brother who worked as a real estate attorney. "There are some things not right about how they transferred the deed. They could not have done it legally without your signature." Just then, Eric walked by with his wife, Jessica, talking loudly about their renovation plans. "Probably got the kitchen first," he announced, running his hand over the granite countertop I had helped pick out. "Maybe knock down a wall or two and make it all ours." My stomach churned, and glancing around the kitchen, I noticed the folder with the paperwork my parents had shown me when we first made the agreement. It was still on top of the refrigerator, where Mom always kept important documents. While everyone was distracted by Eric's grand plans, I quietly grabbed it and slipped it into my purse. "I need some air," I told Betcho as I headed out to the back porch. Once outside, I pulled out the papers with shaking hands. There it was, the original contract I had signed, clearly stating that the house would be in my name in exchange for the down payment. Then I found something else, a letter from their lawyer, dated just 2 weeks ago, warning them that transferring the deed without my consent could be considered fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Stop sulking. Be happy for your brother." That is when I knew what I had to do. This was not just about the money anymore, it was about standing up for myself after years of being pushed aside. With trembling hands, I texted Marquez, "Are you free tomorrow? I need legal help." His reply came swiftly. "Betcho told me what happened. Come to my office at 9 a.m. Bring any documents you have." Walking back inside, I found my mom and George huddled with Eric in the living room, probably making more plans for MY house. They looked up as I entered, their faces a mixture of annoyance and disdain. "Finally decided to stop being dramatic?" my mother asked, raising an eyebrow. I managed a small smile, which surprised them. "Actually, I want to thank you," I said calmly. "You helped me see things very clearly." They exchanged confused glances, clearly expecting more tears or pleading. But I did not have to beg anymore. I was no longer the dutiful daughter who always did her duty without receiving anything in return. As I grabbed my purse to leave, I heard Eric chuckle and say, "See? It is fine. She will get over it." I turned around one last time. "No, Eric, I will not get over it, but you will wish I had." The next morning, I sat in Marquez's office, clutching a mug of coffee to calm my nerves. He reviewed the documents spread across his desk, occasionally jotting down notes and shaking his head. After what felt like hours, he looked up at me with a small smile. "Mia, they really messed up here," he said, holding up the lawyer's warning letter. "This deed transfer is not just questionable. It is fraudulent. You provided the down payment. You signed the initial documents. And there is clear documentation of the agreement. Legally, they cannot give away a house that was supposed to be yours." "But they already did," I replied, my voice cracking. "The deed is in Eric's name. A fraudulent transfer can be reversed," Marquez explained, reaching for his phone. "And I have a friend at the district attorney's office who would be very interested in this case, which could lead to criminal charges." My heart skipped a beat at his words, criminal charges. I did not want my parents to go to jail, even after everything. The thought of them facing legal trouble made me hesitate. "Listen to me," Marquez said firmly. "They stole $175,000 from you. That is grand theft. They committed fraud. And from these bank statements, it looks like they may have forged your signature on some documents. They are counting on you being too nice to fight back." He was right. My entire life, they had counted on me being the understanding one, the one who would sacrifice without complaint. As we spoke, my phone buzzed incessantly with messages from my mother, alternating between guilt trips and demands that I stop acting like a child. "What do you want to do?" Marquez asked, watching me intently. I took a deep breath. "I want my house back. And I want them to understand they cannot treat me like this anymore." Marcus nodded and began typing on his computer. "I am going to file an emergency injunction to prevent them from making any changes to the property. Then we will proceed with legal action to void the transfer. They will be served tomorrow." Leaving his office, I felt lighter. For the first time since the housewarming party, I was not crying or shaking. Instead, I felt a strange sense of calm. I drove to work for my night shift at the ICU, and halfway there, my phone blew up with notifications. Eric had called 7 times. My mother had called 12 times. There were dozens of texts ranging from angry to panicked. The last one from Eric made me smile. "What the hell did you do?" I silenced my phone and focused on my patients. Let them panic for a while. Let them feel a fraction of the anxiety they had caused me. Tomorrow, They would learn exactly what happens when you push the good daughter too far. The next morning, chaos erupted. I was getting ready for my shift when Betcho called to tell me that my mother and Eric were making a scene outside my apartment. Sure enough, when I peeked out the window, there they were. Eric paced back and forth while my mother pounded on the building's front door. "You have to stop this," my mother screamed when I finally came downstairs. "This will destroy our family. That is rich." I replied, surprisingly calm. "You did not seem concerned about destroying the family when you stole my life savings." Eric stepped forward, his face red with rage. "You are being ridiculous. I am going to have a baby. What were you going to do with that house anyway? Live there alone with your cats?" "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "I have proof of our original agreement right here. Want to see the letter from your lawyer warning you this was illegal? Or should we talk about the documents where someone forged my signature?" The color drained from their faces. My mother grabbed my arm, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Honey, we can work this out as a family. There is no need for lawyers." I gently removed her hand. "We stopped being a family the moment you decided my life savings meant nothing to you. The district attorney's office has copies of everything now. So unless you want to make this worse, I suggest you talk to your lawyer about reversing that deed transfer." "You would send your own mother to jail," she gasped, tears welling up in her eyes. The same tears that had worked on me so many times before. "No, Mom, you would be going to jail. I am simply defending myself." Eric started to say something, but his phone rang. It was his wife, Jessica. I could hear the panic in her voice through the speakerphone as she said the police were at their real house with questions about the deed transfer. They left quickly after that, scrambling to deal with the unfolding mess. Betcho, who had been watching from her car to make sure I was safe, came over and hugged me. "Damn, I have never seen you stand up to them like that," she said, beaming with pride. "I never had proof of their manipulation before." I replied, "It was always my word against theirs. But this time, I have it all in writing." Later that day, Marquez called to tell me that Eric and my parents' lawyer had been in touch. They wanted to settle. Not only would they return the house to me, but they would also pay my legal fees and additional damages. The threat of criminal charges had finally made them realize I was not backing down. "Should we take the settlement?" Marquez asked. "Yes," I said firmly, "but I want them to sign something else, a statement admitting exactly what they did. They cannot pretend this never happened." 2 weeks later, I sat in Marquez's office as my parents and Eric signed the paperwork. The deed was being transferred back to me, along with a settlement that included my legal fees and an additional $50,000 in damages. But most importantly, they signed a notarized statement acknowledging their attempt to defraud me. My mother could not stop crying, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, while George stared at the floor. Eric looked like he had aged 10 years. The smug grin had been replaced by a clenched jaw. His wife, Jessica, had left him after discovering he had been hiding his own financial troubles. Apparently, stealing the house was just the tip of the iceberg. "I need all parties to sign here," the notary said, pointing to the last page. They signed, one by one. When it was my turn, my hand did not shake at all. "I hope you are happy," Eric muttered as he stood up. "You ruined everything." "No," I replied calmly. "You ruined everything when you decided to steal from me. I just made things right." They filed out of the office, and my mother made one last attempt to catch my eye. I turned away. No more guilt trips. No more manipulation. Marquez handed me the new deed with a smile. "Congratulations. The house is officially yours." But I had one more surprise for them. "Actually," I said, pulling out another set of papers, "I would like to sell it." "You would not." My family had already been spreading the word about their misunderstanding with the house, trying to save face with relatives and friends. They did not know I had received an offer from a developer who wanted to turn the property into apartments. The offer was well above market value. "They are going to be furious when they find out," Betcho said later, as we celebrated at our favorite coffee shop. "They thought you would just let them stay there." "That is exactly why I am selling," I replied. "They need to understand that they do not have power over me." The next day, I signed the papers to sell the house. The developer was thrilled. My realtor was thrilled, and I was finally free. The proceeds from the sale, combined with the settlement money, meant I could buy my dream cottage with a garden and still have savings left over. As I drove away from the closing, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from my mother. She was crying, saying she had heard about the sale and begging me to call her back. I deleted it without listening to the end. Some might call it cruel, but I call it boundaries. For the first time in my life, I was not setting myself on fire to keep them warm. I would let them figure out their own lives. I had a cottage to furnish and a garden to plant. The weeks following the sale of the house were transformative. I found a charming cottage on the outskirts of town, with a wraparound porch and enough yard space for the garden I had always dreamed of. Betcho helped me move in, and together we painted the walls in soft, calming colors, nothing like the bold schemes my mother had always insisted were appropriate for a family home. My phone would still light up periodically with messages from family members. Some were angry, calling me selfish for selling the house without giving my parents a chance to work things out. Others tried guilt trips, telling me my mother cried herself to sleep every night. My Aunt Sarah was the only one who supported me, telling the others they should be ashamed of themselves for what they had done. I ran into your mother at the grocery store. Sarah told me over Sunday brunch. She was telling everyone who would listen how ungrateful you are. But most people know the truth now. That statement you made them sign has been making the rounds. I smiled, thinking about how the narrative had changed. I was no longer the difficult daughter who would not help her brother, but the hardworking nurse whose family had tried to steal her savings. My mother's attempts to play the victim were no longer working. Eric and Jessica officially separated, and he moved back in with our parents. I heard through the grapevine that he was working as a sales clerk at an electronics store, his first real job in years. I would occasionally drive past him. I took no joy in seeing them struggle, but I felt a sense of justice. At work, things were also looking up. Once I stopped allowing my family to drain my energy and resources, I could focus on my career. I applied for and received a promotion to charge nurse, which came with better hours and a pay raise. My colleagues noticed the change in me. I smiled more. I spoke up in meetings, and I no longer picked up every holiday shift just because others had real families to spend time with. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset and planning my garden, my mother's number flashed across my phone. Instead of the usual anxiety, I felt a sense of calm as I declined the call. Later, I listened to her voicemail. She asked if I could help Eric with his rent money, as things were so hard for him. In that moment, I deleted the message and went back to my seed catalog. I had ordered tomato seeds, cucumber seeds, and my favorites, violets. The flower beds were already prepared, the soil fertile and waiting for new life. In a way, it seemed like a metaphor for my own life. I had weeded out the toxic relationships and was ready for something beautiful to grow. Rachel used to joke that I should write a book called How to Stop Being a Doormat in 3 Easy Steps. Maybe she was right. All it took was losing my life savings, standing up to my family, and finally putting myself first. It is quite simple. Actually, 6 months after selling the house, my life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. My garden was thriving, the first tomatoes ripening on the vine and the violets blooming in neat rows. I had made friends with my neighbors, joined a local book club, and even started dating again, something I had put off for years because my family demanded so much of my time and energy. The family drama had not disappeared entirely, but I had learned to manage it differently. My mother would still try to reach out periodically, mostly when they needed money. I remained firm in my boundaries. I am not in a position to help, I would say calmly, no matter how many tears or guilt trips they threw my way. The phrase became my shield, protecting me from their manipulation. Eric's situation had worsened. Jessica filed for divorce, and the baby, my nephew, was living primarily with her. She discovered that Eric had taken out credit cards in her name, leaving her with crippling debt. When she came to me for advice, I put her in touch with Marquez, who helped her navigate the legal mess. It felt good to help someone who actually deserved it. One Sunday morning, as I was tending to my garden, a familiar car pulled into my driveway. My mother stepped out, looking older and more tired than I remembered. She had shown up unannounced, probably hoping to catch me off guard. "Your garden is beautiful," she said softly, hovering by the fence. "You always did have a green thumb." "Thank you," I replied, continuing to work with my plants. "But you should not be here without calling first." I know. I know. It is just that I miss you, honey, and I wanted to tell you that your father and I are selling our house. We cannot afford it anymore. And Eric's expenses too." Her voice trailed off, and she looked at me hopefully. I stood up, brushing the dirt off my knees. "Mom, I am not giving you any money. That chapter is closed." "I was not going to ask," she began, but then stopped. "Well, maybe I was. But can you blame me for hoping? You are doing so well, and you are carrying your family. Family does not steal from family," I said firmly. "Family does not forge documents or try to justify theft because one child deserves it more. You made your choice, Mom. Now you are living with the consequences." She left crying, but I did not feel guilty. Instead, I felt proud of myself for holding my boundaries. Later that evening, I hosted a small dinner party for Betcho, Sarah, and some friends from work. As we sat on my porch, drinking wine and watching the fireflies dance in my garden, I realized something profound. This was what family really was. It was not about blood or obligation. It was about choice, respect, and genuine care for one another. To boundaries, Becho toasted, raising her glass with a knowing smile. To growth, I added, thinking of my flourishing garden and my even more flourishing spirit. It has been a year since I stood up to my family, and the transformation in my life still amazes me. My cottage has become a sanctuary, filled with a peace and warmth I never felt in my family's presence. The garden yielded so many vegetables last summer that I started donating the surplus to the local food bank. I sometimes think about how my mother used to scoff at my obsession with gardening, calling it a waste of time. Now it brings me joy, and it helps others. 2. My career has blossomed without the constant drain of family drama. I was recently promoted to nursing supervisor, and my colleagues often comment on how much more confident I have become. I no longer apologize for taking vacation days or saying no to extra shifts when I need to rest. Setting boundaries at home taught me to set them everywhere. Becho jokes that I am becoming something of a local legend at the hospital. New nurses seek me out for advice not just on patient care, but on how to advocate for themselves in difficult situations. Last week, a young nurse thanked me for helping her find the courage to leave an abusive relationship. If you could stand up to your whole family, she said, I can do it with just one person. My parents and Eric are still struggling, but it is no longer my burden to carry. They made their choices, just as I made mine. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people and for yourself is to let them face the consequences of their actions. It is not about revenge anymore, it is about growth and self-respect. The money they stole was just money, but what I gained by standing up to them is priceless: my freedom and my self-worth. The other day, I found an old picture of my family at the housewarming party, taken right before everything fell apart. Looking at their smug faces, I realized I no longer feel angry. Instead, I feel grateful. Their betrayal pushed me to become someone stronger, someone who values herself enough to walk away from toxic relationships, even when they come wrapped in the package of family. My garden is starting to bloom again this spring. Sarah visits often, bringing her grandchildren, who love to help me plant new flowers. Becho and I have our weekly coffee dates, where we laugh about how far I have come from the person who used to answer every demanding phone call from my family. Even Jessica brings my nephew over to visit sometimes. She says the garden has a healing effect on her too. Life is not perfect, but it is authentically mine now. I have learned that sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It is simply becoming better. Every flower that blooms in my garden, every quiet evening on my porch, every boundary I maintain, is a reminder that I chose myself, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat.